All right. Well, thank you for tuning in here, guys. Really excited about the guest I get to interview today. We have none other than the man, the myth, the legendary marketer, David Sharpe. And I've been following David for actually a couple of years now, and I like to tune into the people who are making moves, the people who are having a lot of success. And it's not about the amount of money that they make. It's really about the character that they act with. I read people's walls. I see how they interact and engage with people. And I really want to find, the leadership qualities that, I want to get. And when I started watching David Sharpe over and over and over again, I just kept noticing that he would interact with people. He was never too high and mighty. He was always a really humble, really genuine guy. And I reached out to him and I started talking to him, and that's exactly what I found. He's just a super cool guy. He's down to earth. He doesn't have his head in the clouds. And this is a guy who has literally, this is a business tycoon who has launched. You had a company that was producing something like $150 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, give or take. It was pretty powerful stuff. He's created scores of millionaires, tons of people who are six-figure, seven-figure earners. And, he's got a powerful story. So, David, I really wanted to get you on here because I know that a lot of people want to know the real David. I want to know your story. Where did you come from? What happened in your life? And how did you become a leader? What changed? What flipped? How did you get to where you are right now?
Well, first and foremost, let me just say that was quite an introduction, and I'm very appreciative of that, and I'm very humbled by that. And I also want to reciprocate some of that appreciation and sort of, just edification, I guess, for lack of better words, to you. We've come in, we've blossomed our friendship over the last couple of months, and you are one of the only ones who, when you kind of move into new circles in business, sometimes you ruffle feathers and people are like, well, who's this new person or who's this new girl? And it takes a little while for them to get used to you. So, I recently moved into sort of a new business circle, a new circle of friends, and you were one of the first ones to reach out. And so that to me is what leadership is about. Then, of course, learning more about you and, what you've created, your success, your breakthroughs, the success that you've created yourself also within other people. I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you.
So for me, and of course, let me try to get clarity on the question that you just asked, which was what changed for me to really, excite the leader inside of me.
Yeah.
And I would say that first of all, when I was young, sports helped me with leadership. So I would say that if you have kids, I think that a lot of what we're talking about and a lot of what the change that we want to see in the world that we're trying to sort of create as adults can be created in our youth if we focus a little bit more on what are the things that changed our life and how can we pass those along to either our kids or young people around us, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll say that for me, sports really taught me when I was young how to be a leader, because it was either be a leader or be left out. And so it created what I call positive pressure. And positive pressure is not peer pressure that I feel pressured into doing drugs or skipping school or whatever, but I feel positive pressure to execute and deliver. Mm-hmm. And so when I was young, I learned that at an early age. And that was where those values and those principles, I believe, were instilled in me. And I'm very grateful to my mom. I'm grateful to my dad. I'm grateful to my stepdad for showing up. I now have kids. I know what it's like to, get up early or stay up late or go the extra mile or that drive to school with the kid. And it's like 6:30 in the morning and you're just going, where am I? What's my name? And what's the purpose of my life? Is it to chauffeur these kids around? Is it to, it just feels like such a drag.
Yeah.
Leadership, the leader in me really started to come out in the moments that I began to fall in love with the things that other people found hard and that other people didn't want to do, because those were the moments to where I got to meet myself. And those were the moments that I got to really decide and find out how much consistency I had, how much commitment I had, how far was I willing to go to get the job done. And I think that one of the biggest problems that I struggle with for so long, and I see people who are trying to become entrepreneurs struggling with, is avoiding I'm not going to say avoiding pain, because I don't believe life is all about trying to find pain, but avoiding those challenging situations. It's like having the tough conversation. If you're in a relationship, how do you make your marriage thrive? Well, you've got to talk about the tough stuff. You don't get closer to somebody just when times are good. You get close to somebody when times are challenging, because then you get to really take your relationship to another level. So for me, it's all about, if I feel the real leader comes out in me when I'm faced with a situation that I don't want to do, when I'm faced with a conversation that I don't want to have, when I'm faced with, coming in early or doing something that's like I would rather be somewhere else. That is when I believe the leader is born or reborn in me. And that's over time, doing enough of that enough times, I believe, has really developed my leadership skills.
Wow. So, in that journey, I mean, it always sounds so great, but there's so many trials and tribulations and adversities. And, I know in my life, I went through, in my earlier 20s, I went through addictions. I went through all sorts of, tough times. And for you, what were your biggest challenges and adversities? Like, what were the things where you hit the stop sign, and how did you get through those? What were the tools that you anchored onto? Like, was it like a physical thing? Was it a spiritual? Was it because of mentors? Like, how did you get through those things?
Yeah. So a lot of people who know my story know that I talk a lot about the things that most people seems like they don't, or they try to avoid talking about. And that's the fact that when I was 14, I left home. I was out on the streets. A lot of it had to do with my own choices and the people that I was hanging out around. By 16, I was a father. By 18, I was a full-blown addict. By 20, I was homeless.
Wow.
By 24, I found myself in a bathroom in a laundry room here in St. Petersburg, Florida, hunched over a toilet with just a little bit in the bottom of a bag, if you know what I mean, left over. And that was my entire life.
Wow.
And I spilled it all over the toilet. and let me tell you something. What I did next really created a defining moment. I found myself desperately trying to, soak it up and not lose it. And that's a graphic story, and it could get even more graphic. But the important part about that story is that I decided in that moment when I looked in the mirror that I was either going to die that day or I was going to do something different.
Yeah.
And that was my breakthrough. I believe that I got clean. I believe that I got back on my feet the day before, or even the day that I was going to die. And I don't believe everybody has to go to that point to have a defining moment. But I believe that if we learn to use our struggles as our strengths, that we learn to either identify them when they're happening or look back on them and realize that the things that we went through were not happening to us, but they were happening for us, that we can use those situations to give us tools and to give us experience and to give us wisdom on how to deal with situations in life. And so for me, it's over the course of my years of being alive, the number one tool that I've used to change and change again and grow has been awareness.
Yeah.
I believe the number one key to growing and developing as a human being is having the awareness that things are actually happening in your life, right? I believe that most people continue on broken, miserable, unhappy, not because they don't want to change, but because they're choosing not to look at it. That's why in sales and marketing, one of our biggest jobs is to help people see their pain.
Yeah.
Because they don't even know they're in pain, right? Because they're not looking at it. It's not that they don't have the capability to have awareness. but they don't have any awareness around that because they're choosing not to look at it, not to deal with it. There's a common theme that's happening now. I'm talking about leadership was developed in me dealing with difficult situations. And then these defining moments happened when I gained some awareness that, wow, this is not working for me. I need to do something different. And so I went to my dad's house, knocked on his door, asked him to help me save my life, essentially. He let me in. He let me sleep on his couch. I slept on his couch for 4 months. He paid me out of his paycheck, took me to construction jobs. I came home, slept on the couch, which wasn't much, but it was like the Taj Mahal compared to where I had been. Mm-hmm. And at month 4, I bought a bed. We slept in the same room. And that's where I began to see that I had a mess of a life. But I also began to have, if we stop hurting ourselves and we stop putting ourselves in situations to either numb out or to ignore, or to kind of cut off that creative connection that we have to some sort of a higher power or whatever it is that's feeding us, right? Because we're getting our creativity and our inspiration from somewhere. And when we use drugs, are in negative relationships, or, are damaging ourselves in some way, we cut off that connection. So I had recreated that connection, right? And I'm staying generic here because whatever your spiritual belief is, or just whatever your, what I want you to honor that. Mm-hmm. But for me, I had reconnected, and I saw that I had a mess, but I also saw that I had a drive and a desire and a dream. Mm. My number one thing was I wanted to learn how to take my mess and turn it into a message. And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know where that was going to turn out, where that was going to take me, who I was going to run into. But eventually, through a turn of events, I found entrepreneurship and marketing and home-based business entrepreneurship and network marketing and direct sales. Mm-hmm. And I was led into an environment that taught me how to take all of those very unrefined skills that I had, because we all have natural gifts. Mm-hmm. We all were born with something special. I like what Les Brown says. He says, you have greatness within you. I believe we all do. It's just we have to give ourselves the opportunity to find the right people and find the right the right environment to where we can take those skills and refine them so that mess becomes our message, and those kind of maybe once curses can become our gifts.
Wow. That is amazing. So much wisdom, David. And, speaking of turning your mess into a message, let's just say that there's going to be a lot of youth who might be watching this video here. Because you went down that path, and it's a slippery slope to get into the whole life of addiction. And, is there any warning signs that you could tell people on how to start recognizing that they might be going down that path of danger? Any advice, any mindset keys to help them get over that? Because it's seducing to get into that world of, that downward spiral for a youth, right? So what are the things that you could help them start to recognize?
Well, the problem with addiction and the problem of your life spiraling out of control is a lot of times you don't know that it's bad until it's too bad to kind of catch it, mm-hmm. until it's too late. So the number one thing that I would say is know that there is help. Know that there is help. One of the biggest things that I'm a fan of is not keeping people from their misery. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a big fan of trying to stop somebody from hitting their head. So many times we're trying to, as we've heard this before, well, if I knew what I knew now when I was your age, I would have never went down this path. And the truth of the matter is if you tell me that as a youth, I'm going to go down the path anyways, and I'm going to figure it out all by myself, because after all, I think that I'm smarter than you anyways, so I'm not going to have those same problems. A couple of years or a couple of months or a couple of weeks later, I go, man, I wish I would have listened. But that's human nature. So the first thing that I always tell people is when you get yourself in that situation, know that there's help. However, you have to, when the help reaches out, reach back.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. Okay. So if you're an addict, just know that there's like a 12-step program for you. There's a recovery center for you. Mm-hmm. There's resources that are available to you to help you out, and many of them are free. It's going to be very difficult to achieve your financial in your relationship and your happiness goals if you're addicted. Okay. If you have some sort of a gorilla on your back. It was amazing. My track record when I was using, when I was in the streets, when I was drinking and drugging, man, I got locked up a couple of times. That's my truth. Here's the interesting thing. Since I've gotten clean, which I'm now 10 years into 12-step recovery, okay, in 12 years into being, on this path of long-term recovery, man, I've never went back to jail again. Isn't that interesting? Quite a coincidence, right? And I've gone on to create multiple million-dollar businesses, impact people, turn my mess into a message, because I had to clear away the thing that was holding me back. So I'm not going to tell anybody, here's how to avoid pain. I'm just going to say, hey, listen, you're going to bump your head. There's going to be some pain along the way. That's all part of the journey. Just be open and willing to get some help if you find yourself in that situation.
Wow. Yeah, that's great advice. And when people are dealing with the shame or those, those negative enemy tactics, that sort of just the self-sabotage, that feelings of self-worth, I'm not good enough, I've screwed up, it's too late for me. I mean, David, you went from like here to here. I mean, you did the full rebound. You went way down and then you went like 20,000 times higher, man. So the beautiful thing about that story is when people are listening to someone who's gone there, I mean, you can relate to so many people, and then you're like, hey, you know what? It's all right. You can go all the way up to here. So I think a real powerful message in that is that, I mean, what's shame? You know what I mean? Like people who've been able to come from here to over there. So someone else, they judge themselves, and then they hear someone like you say, you know what, that it doesn't even matter. Is that basically how you just get through it? The self-sabotaging feelings, you just say, screw it? Or was there a mentor that kind of believed in you, or did you just do it yourself?
Well, I don't want anyone to think that anything that I've accomplished has been alone. It's been with the help of a lot of people along the way. Was there one mentor that I hired that I paid, $100,000 and he gave me the magic formula? No. There's been a lot of coaches. There's been a lot of consultants. There's been a lot of counselors. There's been a lot of people along the way, family members, professionals. I mean, I don't seek counseling oftentimes within family. I believe that there's an emotional line there that I have to go get help in a healthy way. But I do want to make that clear that there's been so many people along the way. If I was to write a book on everybody who's helped me, it would be one of the biggest books in the world, just because there's been so many people along the way.
Wow.
For me, I don't know that there's been any one thing or any one person that's made a big difference in how I've dealt with the shame and the guilt of my past. Yeah. One thing that I can tell you is that one way if you are having any shame and guilt from your past, one of the best ways to remedy that is to begin to do the next right thing right now. One of the biggest problems that I struggled with is it was always something I was going to do or fix tomorrow. And so I see this a lot with people's personal lives and also with people in businesses. Well, I'll get to it tomorrow. The problem with tomorrow is tomorrow never comes, because tomorrow it's tomorrow again. So it's got to be today. It's got to be now. There's got to be a willingness and an honesty now to do something different. And you would be amazed if you struggle with depression, for example, how good you feel if you get out of the bed and get out of that dark house and go get some sunshine and go for a walk. It's now, but you've got to get up and do something different. So I would say that one principle that I learned, and I've literally, I believe, rewired my brain with this one single principle. This one thing that I learned, and it's also now been proven scientifically with neuroscience, we've now realized that we can actually rewire our brains. Our brains are made of something called neuroplasticity. Yep. And so when we do something for so many years or decades, we begin to have certain defaults, and one of my defaults was guilt and shame. And so any time I was in a situation, even being successful, I didn't feel like I deserved that success because I defaulted to feeling guilty. I defaulted to feeling shame because that was how I felt for so long because of my past. But somebody told me one time, they said, Dave, and this is it, this is the principle. They said, Dave, there's no way for you to think yourself into a new way of acting. You have to act yourself into a new way of thinking. And that's not something that I made up. Okay. So I don't get credit for that. That's something that I learned from people in recovery processes and great mentors along the way. I began to really, that was simple enough that I could wrap my head around that. Mm-hmm. And then I learned later that there was some real scientific evidence behind that if I begin, the only way for me to actually change my brain, I can't just sit around and think about it all day long. I'm not saying meditation is not useful. I'm not saying that having positive thinking, but as Tony Robbins says, you can't just say there's no weeds in the lawn. There's no weeds in the lawn. There's no weeds in the lawn. That doesn't work. You can't just sit on your couch with a bag of potato chips and say, there's a Ferrari in my driveway. There's a Ferrari in my driveway. That's not going to happen. You have to literally get up off your duff and go and do the work that puts the Ferrari. So when I learned that I could act myself into a new way of thinking, that was when I began to suddenly see a change in my mindset, and my default started to change. So no longer did I always sabotage my success because when I accomplished something, I didn't feel like I deserved it.
Wow, that's cool. And so what was it that you started to do? For some people, it's they start reading a book every single day. For some people, it's they go to the gym. Was there a specific activity that you start to do that started to make a big difference in your life, that, you started to notice a big, huge compounding effect over the years?
Well, one of the biggest things that I started to do was I started to network with people. Mm-hmm. Okay? So I started to put myself in environments that I could connect with other human beings. Because the problem with me, and this is, I think the problem with every addict and every person who's struggling business, is we don't realize that our best thinking got us where we're at right now. Think about that for a second. My best thinking, my absolute best thinking that I could come up with got me right where I'm at right now. So a lot of people say, well, I don't need to kind of connect with anybody else. I don't need mentors. I don't need to go to events. I don't need to read books or listen to audios. But your best thinking's got you the results that you have right now. So how else are you going to achieve them? So I started to really see the value in connecting with people. So I would go and I would, get out of my house, and I would go to, sometimes it'd be 12-step meetings. And I still go to those to this day. I started going to business events. I started to get out and, network and prospect people. And then I began to develop my work ethic. And my work ethic, I realized, was actually pretty strong if I had the clarity to know which direction I was going. Mm-hmm. And what I found out was when I didn't have clarity, I didn't have confidence, because without clarity, I don't know where I'm going. So I'm just kind of floundering. Mm-hmm. So I would try to get clear. That's the number one thing I would do. I would get clear, and then that clarity would give me the confidence to move forward. And then I just started taking action on things. And this was when I bought, I got into, direct sales, and I got into, network marketing, and I got into, actually I was prospected by a guy. I had no idea, and I'll say this, sometimes we're praying for something and we don't see it, that it's right there in front of our face. So I was working construction, praying for a break, and this guy came and prospected me for this home business. And I was like, no way, man, I've done that in the past. I don't want to do that crap. And finally, at the end of the job, I took like $800 that I had just made from that job, and I went and bought this this cell phone, and bought into this business and all this different kind of stuff. And I failed miserably at that business. But that business ended up shutting down. The whole company shut down. I didn't even get my phone. I never even got the phone. But during me building that business, I did some things that made me uncomfortable. I went and I didn't have any money, so I bought signs from Vistaprint, right? You can get like free stuff off of there. Okay. Not endorsing Vistaprint, but I'm just saying I was so broke that I couldn't afford, business cards. So I got like a magnet for the side of my truck and signs for my yard and business cards. And I went around and I prospected people, man. And I learned how to put myself out there and I developed my work ethic. And I think that, so many times we're looking for the secret strategy, or we're looking for the secret book or the secret line or the secret audio or the secret whatever, the magic bullet. And if you can especially if you're starting a business, if you can get some clarity on what you want to do, which is probably going to have to come from somebody who's going to help you, because remember, your best thinking got you where you're at right now. Get some clarity on what you want to do. Have a little confidence about, okay, this is the direction that I'm going. And then for that first 90 days, just take ridiculous action and put yourself out there. You will then have something that you can work with. Most people, they don't take any action and they're like, well, I'm not getting the results that I want. And if they come to me and they say that, I say, well, what do we have to work with? Well, I don't know. I haven't taken any action. Well, then there's a problem. You're either not clear or you're lazy. Because if you're not clear, that's a problem. Let's get you clear. But if you're clear and you know what you're supposed to be doing and you've taken no action, then you're lazy. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to help you or not.
Wow. So someone comes to you and they ask you, David, how do I get clear? What questions are you going to ask them? What are you going to challenge them with?
I'm going to ask them what their vision is for themselves financially. I'm going to ask them what they want on a monthly basis. And then I'm going to ask them how many hours a week are they willing to put into what it is that they're going to do to achieve that number? Mm-hmm. And then how many months are they willing to work to allow that to happen? Yeah. Okay. And so first of all, I'll figure out if somebody's in the real world, and I've got to give credit. That's actually a prospecting script from Eric Worre. Mm-hmm. But it's a fantastic little script that will help you work with somebody to help them get clarity. So I'll figure out if somebody has a realistic goal, right? Now, if they say, I am willing to work 2 hours a week, I've got a $50,000 a month budget or a goal, and I want to hit it in 30 days. I'll say, listen, Bozo the clown is down the street and he's probably taking consulting clients, and you can go, that's not realistic. So the first thing we got to do is we got to help somebody get a clear, realistic goal. Okay. Mm-hmm. The other side of that is maybe sometimes somebody is way undervaluing themselves. Right. So we have to help them stretch their vision for what's possible. Maybe they say, I only want to earn $500 a month. I might stretch them. I might challenge them and say, hey, listen, how many hours a week are you willing to put into this? How long do you have to dedicate to this to get this off the ground? Mm-hmm. I think that we should stretch you a little bit so you have something to strive for that might, stretch your thinking a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then I'll develop a game plan with them, right? I'll ask them what their commitment level is. What's your commitment level from 1 to 10? We'll develop a game plan, some simple steps that they can take. And then I will step back and let them introduce themselves to themselves to find out what they have.
Wow, that is awesome. That's a powerful thing to say, because especially in the network marketing world, so many people they sign people up, but they don't really get to the whole mindset and developing someone's inner core so that they're really hardened, they're ready, they've turned from jello into wood into steel. And it sounds like you got a little bit of a process that really helps people get along that track, which is super powerful. And talking about launching, that's a big word. I think a lot of people miss that when it comes to building a business. They just don't get the idea of how to actually launch and what it takes. Their time commitment's like, oh yeah, no, I can do 5, maybe 10 hours a week. Is that even realistic to launch a business?
It depends on what your income goal is.
Right.
So if your income goal, I think, is, a couple of $100 to $500 to maybe $1,000 a month, maybe $2,000 a month. I think that you could do 5 to 10 hours a week and have some success if you have the clarity. That's the first step. If you have the clarity on what you're supposed to do, and the other thing is that you really have to figure out what is your most profitable skill set, right? So I see a lot of people who are really great talking to people or great on the phones, and they're hunched. They look like this. They're hunched over their computer like this. And it's like, let's get you. I know that you may not want to long-term be cold calling on the phone, but let's get you in an element that you're going to succeed at. And then once we have some success under our belt, because the ultimate goal is to make money and achieve the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't particularly matter how you get there, at least at first. Once you've got some success, then we can look at how you can adjust to make it more of a kind of a lifestyle style business. But I think it's all about helping somebody create a realistic goal, helping them develop a game plan. The game plan's got to be simple. And then really kind of stepping back for those first few days or first few weeks and really letting them really find out where their commitment is, where their consistency is, what they're willing to do. Because you want somebody who you're working with to always be able to own their results or also own their failures. I don't want, if I'm mentoring you, if you're working with me, I don't want to take credit for your success. I'm also certainly not going to take credit for your failures either.
No, that's a true story. That's a really interesting thing about making mistakes. So what are the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they get into being an entrepreneur, when they get into network marketing? I know that there's a pretty big list of the very common ones, but have you been able to restructure that a little bit and maybe help people identify, hey, don't do this because this is going to trip you up, man, or do this because this is going to help you a lot more?
So I was thinking initially of some of the things that I've done wrong. I see a lot of stuff, and I still do stuff wrong to this day too. I think that's the beautiful part about, being an entrepreneur and being a marketer, is that it's a constant learning process. Yeah. And I actually love challenges and failures just as long as I'm failing forward. Because those failures and those challenges are teaching me lessons that I couldn't learn if I was not doing anything. So the number one thing that I see people doing wrong is not doing anything at all. That's the number one thing. If you can just learn and embrace this one phrase that I'm going to give you, you can be a millionaire. You can be a multimillionaire. You may even be able to be a billionaire. It's called learning how to take ignorant action. Ignorant action is one of the most profitable skill sets that you can develop. And that doesn't mean that we just go, we just go in some direction for miles and miles and miles and never ask anybody for directions. But what it does mean is it means that while I'm waiting for you to return my call, Mr. Mentor, I'm not just sitting around on my hands. I'm moving. I'm doing something. Before I call you on the phone, Mr. Mentor, to complain about why the business or the system or the product is not working for me, I'm going to go and I'm going to prospect somebody and I'm going to ask for the sale. I'm going to ask for the sale. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, is I'm going to learn to ask the universe for what I want. One of the biggest problems that I see people having, and I had this too when I first got started in sales, because the bottom line is we're all in sales. Whether you're selling your child on getting good grades and behaving in school, whether you're selling your child on being an entrepreneur, whether you're selling your spouse on, going out on a second date with you or marrying you. I mean, congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You just got engaged. You guys are incredible.
Oh, the marriage is coming up soon too.
Wonderful.
No waiting.
So we are always selling people. The problem is that to get married, what did you have to do?
I had to
get
ask.
Engaged.
I had to ask.
You had to ask.
Yeah.
You had to ask, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the most special, incredible thing that will probably ever happen to you up until this point, right? I'm not trying to minimize the miraculous, but let's give the fiance some credit.
Oh, I know.
She's probably the best thing that's happened to you in a long time if you're anything like my wife.
Amazing.
If
Absolutely.
She is anything like, so the best thing that's ever happened to us guys, who probably on our own, who knows where we'd be, we had to ask for that. So that first prospect that you're going to enroll in your business, that first sale that you're going to make to a customer, that first whatever it is that's going to happen in the first dollar that you're going to make is not going to come from somebody just coming and saying, Shane, I tell you what, you really look like you need $100 today. I was looking at you from across the room and you just look like you could use $100. So it's going to come from you coming up and delivering value and showing that what you have to offer is worth the money that you're going to be asking for here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then simply say, Shane, are you ready to get started?
Boom. Ask and you shall receive. It's a golden rule. Wow, man, that's great. I think there's just been like countless priceless gems here from you, David. That's awesome. Is there any, do you have a morning routine? I know that when I started having a morning routine, it really changed a lot of the things in my life. Like I just had this powerful routine that I learned from listening to one of my mentors, and he had this whole thing, get up early. I used to go to bed at 11:30, but I'd get up at 8 or 9. And being self-employed and running my own business, that I can do that. But I think that was hurting me, man. So what's your routine? Do you have an explosive morning routine?
I don't know if I have an explosive morning routine, but I have a what's the opposite of explosive? I have an implosive nighttime routine. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. I have moved the importance of the nighttime daytime routine to the nighttime.
Okay.
And so I'll talk about that because that's what I feel like I'm beginning to master. What I found out while I was very busy trying to find the secrets of the universe of how to get wealthy and how to become successful and how to become more successful, I found out that there were some simple basic needs that I wasn't meeting, that I was overlooking, that were keeping me from reaching the levels of performance and productivity that I wanted to hit. And one of those very basic needs was sleep. Okay. And so one of the things that has become glamorized in our society nowadays is basically becoming a workaholic. And so when you see some of these big kind of hotshot gurus who are all over Facebook talking about hustling, and I've done my fair share of that kind of content and conversation too, but it's really, especially in America, we don't work to live, we live to work. And that's become sort of a problem because we get up early and we stay up late. And part of that is great, especially if you're young in your career and you just need to take ridiculous action to get momentum. Mm-hmm. As you begin to grow in your entrepreneur journey, you begin to get older, first of all, and our bodies begin to sort of break down. And so I took a look at my diet. I took a look at going to the gym, my exercise, but the one thing that I was ignoring was sleep. So what I became obsessed about was going to bed every single night at the same time and going to bed to strive to get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep each night. Because there's research that's been done that shows if you go with 5 or less hours of sleep for more than a couple of days or a week or something like that, I'm butchering it a little bit, but you're actually impaired to the level of being legally drunk. So how do you ever expect to be able to deliver and execute in your business if you're tired? If you think back to the days that you've been tired, you'll realize that, and then you compare that to a day that you were well rested, you'll realize that the day that you were well rested, you executed on a level that you just felt incredible. I mean, you were nailing stuff, you were calling, you were focused, you were clear. And part of, our struggle as entrepreneurs, especially if you're ADD like me, is having clarity. It's being able to stay on task. It's being able to focus. It's being able to follow through. And so my morning routine has somewhat fluctuated. I've gone from working out, I've gone to meditating. I typically do a little bit of prayer and meditation in the morning, and I have a little bit of quiet time and some reflection. I make sure that I have a good breakfast and usually some exercise. But then I kick my day off. I've become less concerned with the morning than I have been with the night, because I've found out that instead of putting a Band-Aid on the problem, which I was looking, and again, I'm not saying having a great morning routine is not important, but that was only a Band-Aid. My morning routine was only as effective as my nighttime routine.
Cool. I definitely think it's important to wind down, get proper rest. I'm a huge advocate of getting the right amount of sleep and taking action with your health. It's a night and day difference for ability to focus and, stay on track. Just as we kind of, is there any other advice or tips that you kind of want to, give to the viewers here to have success? And then I got one last question I want to ask you after that.
Never underestimate the power of your experience in your message.
Mm-hmm.
I think so many people I talk to, especially who come to me, who want to learn how to speak better, market better, become more influential, make more of an impact, leave a bigger legacy. I ask them, tell me your story. I don't really have a story, Dave. At least it's not like yours. And the problem with that is that you do, and you're undervaluing your experience. There's things that as a man, as a woman, that are extremely valuable to people. And when you learn how to take those experiences and you learn how to package them, either in a conversation or a speech or even a product, then you can begin to leverage the most valuable commodity in the entire world, which is information, which all information, all books, all movies, all courses, all everything came from somebody's head that came from somebody's experience. And when you learn that your experience is just as valuable as the man or woman sitting or standing next to you, then you begin to develop your confidence and your self-esteem to be able to share your story and to share your advice or knowledge or experience, and to do it in a way that makes an impact in the world. So I would say that the number one most important thing is for you to recognize where you've been, and also remember where you're going, and realize that where you've been matters, and it didn't happen in vain. It happened for a reason, so you could use that experience to make an impact on somebody in the future, even if it's not to change the world. Maybe it's just to change your world.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's amazing, man. And thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing everything. Is the hustle worth it? Is it worth being unbalanced for a season of your life to make it?
I believe so. I think the hustle is worth it. And I think hustle is not overrated. I think that it can just be used and abused when we put it in front of friends and family, and we put it in, and we sacrifice everything in our life just for the hustle, because then we forget why we're hustling. Mm-hmm. And what I can tell you from becoming financially free, man, the things the fact that I can hire a full-time nanny so my wife can work and do and help out with a business and go to work out and all that kind of stuff, to live in a house that I own outright, to drive cars that I own outright, to have no debt, to have liquid cash in the bank and investments in my 30s, to have those are the reasons why I do what I do. But I also, throughout my experience, have realized that I have got to find a little bit of balance to be able to actually enjoy some of the fruits of my labor. But is the hustle worth it? Come on, my brother.
Hell yeah. It's all about the hustle, man. I appreciate this. David, you are the man, legendary marketer, Mr. David Sharpe. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on here. You guys reach out to David, connect. He's got a Facebook page. Make sure you like that, add him on social media. Follow this guy. He's a difference maker in the world. He's a game changer. He makes a powerful difference in so many people's lives, and I know he's going to continue it. So, David, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate you, and thank you.
You're welcome, my friend. You're very welcome.